The war between the human colonies and the Vryn Empire had ended in silence. Whole worlds lay in ashes, their cities hollow and empty. The humans had fought not for conquest but survival, while the Vryn, an ancient race known for their long lives and strange hunger for energy, had once believed themselves untouchable. But their power had faded, their fleets shattered by human strategy and will. Captain Marcus Hale stood on the gray surface of Varthus, the Vryn homeworld, his boots sinking slightly into dust that had once been a shining plaza. Above him, dark towers leaned like broken bones against a crimson sky. He had seen too many worlds like this, but something about Varthus felt heavier. It was as if sorrow itself lived in the air. He came not as a conqueror, but as an envoy. His orders were clear: collect reparations from the Vryn and ensure peace terms were respected. Humanity had paid too much for this war already. His soldiers stood behind him, silent and watchful, while the last rulers of the Vryn gathered before a cracked throne. At the center of them stood a woman unlike any Marcus had ever seen. Her name was Celira. Her hair shimmered like black glass, her eyes faintly glowing red, not in malice but in deep exhaustion. Her skin was pale like moonlight, yet her stance was proud. Even in ruin, she carried herself like someone who still believed in dignity. The old Vryn Emperor, her father, spoke in a low voice. "Human, you have defeated us. The war is yours. What do you demand?" Marcus answered calmly. "The Alliance demands reparations, energy cores, technology, and starship schematics. Enough to rebuild the colonies your fleets destroyed." The Emperor nodded and gestured for servants to bring forward a chest filled with crystalline shards. They glowed softly, a symbol of power. But when Marcus examined them, his sensors showed only decay. They were empty, worthless. He straightened slowly. "You think we can be fooled?" he said quietly. His voice was not angry, but it carried across the hall like thunder. "You burned half our worlds. Do you believe lies will buy peace?" The Emperor trembled and Celira's eyes flickered with shame. The truth was clear: the Vryn had nothing left to give. Their cities starved, their forges were cold, their empire dying. Marcus looked around the hall, seeing the thin faces of people who had once ruled the stars. For the first time he felt pity instead of hate. Then the Emperor made a desperate choice. He stepped forward and said, "Then take my blood as payment. Take my daughter. Let her stand as our bond of peace." The words hung in the air like a blade. Celira's head snapped toward him, disbelief on her face. Marcus froze. It was not uncommon in ancient treaties for one side to offer a hostage of royal blood, but in this modern galaxy, it felt barbaric. "I don't take slaves," Marcus said firmly. The Emperor's voice cracked. "Then take her life and end our shame. But leave our people alive." Celira raised her chin. "If my life can save my people, then I will go. But I will not be chained." Something in her courage struck Marcus deeply. He had seen fear, hate, surrender, but not this. She did not beg, did not cry. She looked at him as an equal, even in defeat. Slowly he nodded. "Then you'll come with us. As a guest, not as a prisoner." The hall was silent. Soldiers on both sides stared in disbelief. When Marcus turned to leave, Celira followed without being told. She didn't look back. Aboard the Resolute, his flagship, the crew whispered about her. Some were afraid. The Vryn were said to feed on the life energy of others, though no one had ever proven it. Some believed she was dangerous. Marcus, however, watched quietly as Celira explored the ship's corridors, silent and graceful like someone walking through a dream. She avoided light at first. The humans had brighter ships than the Vryn cities, and she flinched at every gleam. Marcus noticed this and ordered the engineers to adjust the lighting in her quarters. "Let her see the world slowly," he told them. Celira began to spend time in the observation deck watching stars drift by. One evening Marcus found her standing there, her reflection faint in the glass. "You don't sleep," he said softly. "We do not dream as you do," she replied. "The Vryn live too long in shadow. Dreams belong to the living." Her words carried sadness he could feel but not fully understand. Over the weeks, she began to learn about humans, how they rebuilt after loss, how they argued and laughed even when things were broken. She watched the crew work side by side. Humans from a dozen worlds, each with different languages but the same determination. "Your people," she said one day. "They fall again and again, and still rise." "How?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Because no one else will fix the universe for us. That simple answer seemed to stay with her. She asked to help, and Marcus gave her small tasks, reading navigation charts identifying old Vryn ruins on scanned worlds. She was quick, curious, and precise. Some of the crew began to trust her. Others still kept their distance. One night, when the ship passed through a plasma storm, energy surged through the hull. The lights flickered, systems failing. Celira sensed something wrong. She could feel energy itself, the flow of power that gave the ship life. She rushed to the control deck, her hands glowing faintly as she steadied the pulse of the engines with her old ability. When the storm cleared, the ship floated safely again. The engineers stared at her in awe. She had saved them all. After that day, whispers changed. They no longer called her the vampire, but the lady. Marcus thanked her quietly. "You didn't have to risk yourself." She looked at him, her eyes soft for the first time. "Maybe I wanted to feel useful again. Maybe I wanted to understand what makes your people so strong." For the first time, he saw her smile. Small, uncertain, but real. Time passed. The Resolute was reassigned to patrol near the Vryn border to ensure the peace treaty held. Reports came that some Vryn generals refused to accept the surrender. Marcus knew war could return at any moment. One morning, Celira stood beside him on the bridge as they looked out into the endless dark. "They will not forgive me for this," she said quietly. "You chose peace," Marcus replied. "If they hate you for that, they were never your people to begin with." She turned to him, studying his face. "And you? Do you hate us for what we did to your worlds?" He shook his head. "Hate doesn't rebuild anything. I'd rather build." That night, Celira wrote something in her language, an ancient Vryn vow of allegiance, and placed it in his hand. "You gave me life when I expected death," she said softly. "Among my people, that is a bond deeper than blood." Marcus didn't fully understand her words, but he understood the feeling behind them. Yet even as a quiet bond formed between them, far away, the Vryn generals plotted revenge. They saw Celira's survival as betrayal. Her father, trapped by shame and pride, listened to their counsel. Fleet movements began again. On the Resolute, unaware of the storm rising in the stars, Marcus watched Celira step into sunlight for the first time, filtered through protective glass, her skin glowing gold instead of pale silver. The crew paused to watch. For a moment it felt as if an old curse had broken, but deep inside him Marcus knew peace never lasted long in the galaxy. He just didn't know that soon they would be forced to fight together, not as enemies but as something neither of them had expected. The months passed quietly aboard the Resolute. Celira had learned many things about humans: their strange humor, their hunger for progress, their need to build even after every loss. She had begun to understand why they had won the war, not because of their weapons but because of their hearts. Marcus saw the change in her. She walked the decks without fear now, greeting crew members, asking questions about navigation and ship repairs. Once she had lived in a palace. Now she stood beside engineers and pilots, helping where she could. She no longer felt like a relic of a dying empire, she felt alive. But peace, Marcus knew, never lasted long. Rumors began to spread. Some of the Vryn generals had broken away from the Emperor, claiming he was weak. They wanted revenge. A rebel fleet was gathering beyond the dark rim of the sector. Marcus called a meeting with his officers. "If they cross the border," he said, "they'll strike first at us. The Resolute is the nearest ship to their space." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had fought the Vryn once before, and they all remembered how costly that war had been. When the meeting ended, Marcus found Celira waiting in the observation deck. She had heard the news. "They're coming, aren't they?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said. "Your father's generals want to erase what we've built." Celira lowered her gaze. "They won't stop with you. They'll go after him too. He gave me a way to save our people, but they'll call it betrayal." Marcus studied her face. There was fear there, but also something deeper, a quiet determination. "Then we make our stand here," he said. "Together." 2 weeks later, the enemy fleet appeared. Massive Vryn dreadnoughts, their hulls burning crimson, cutting through the stars like blades. The lead ship sent a message. "This is Admiral Dreth of the Vryn Reclamation Fleet. Return the stolen daughter of the Empire, or we will take her back by force." Marcus stepped forward to the communicator. His voice was calm, steady. "Lady Celira is not stolen. She's free, and she's under the protection of the Earth Alliance. You'll have to go through us." The line went dead. Seconds later, the first blast hit. The war had begun again. The Resolute shuddered under the impact. Energy bolts tore across its shields, lighting the darkness. Marcus shouted orders, his voice rising over the alarms. All batteries fire at will. Evasive pattern Delta. The crew moved fast. Every hand, every station. They had faced worse odds before, and they would not yield now. Celira stood near the tactical console, her eyes glowing faintly as she reached out with her mind. The Vrin were strong in telepathic warfare. They could crush weaker minds, forcing surrender. But she had trained with the human officers, learned their methods. Now she turned her gift into a shield. When the enemy's psychic wave struck, her body trembled, but the human minds held. She had created a barrier, a wall of light between two species. Marcus saw her stumble and rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. Celira, he shouted. Her voice was weak but steady. I can hold them back, but not for long. He placed her gently against the console. Do what you can. That's enough. Hours passed. The Resolute fought like a living thing. Several human ships arrived for support, but the enemy fleet still outnumbered them 3-1. When their shields dropped below 30%, Marcus made a choice. He turned to his second officer. Prepare a strike team. We're boarding the enemy flagship. You'll never make it, the officer said. Then we'll make it count, Marcus replied. Celira's hand caught his arm. You can't face them alone. They'll kill you before you reach the bridge. He met her gaze. Then tell me another way. Her silence was his answer. Moments later, a small assault craft launched from the Resolute, cutting through enemy fire like a dart of light. Inside, Marcus and a dozen Marines readied their weapons. The shuttle slammed into the Vrin flagship's hull, and they breached through the corridor. The fight was brutal and fast. The halls of the Vrin ship were dark and cold, echoing with alarms. Marcus moved like a soldier born for this, focused, unstoppable. His team fell one by one, but they cleared the path. When he reached the central chamber, he found the Emperor himself, not captured, but standing there proud and weary. His armor was cracked, his crown broken. Behind him, a tall, scarred man stepped forward. You are Marcus Hale, said Admiral Dreth, the human who thinks he can steal our future. I didn't steal her, Marcus said. You threw her away. Dreth roared and raised his weapon. Marcus fired first. The blast struck true, but before Dreth fell, he hurled a spear of red energy that shattered the floor. The ship groaned, systems failing. Celira's voice echoed in Marcus's communicator. Marcus, get out of there! He looked up. Through the shattered dome, the stars burned bright. He could see the Resolute locked in battle above. He could also see the Emperor staring at him, not with hatred but sorrow. End it, the Emperor said quietly. Let my people live. Before Marcus could answer, Celira appeared, teleported from the Resolute using an emergency beacon. She stood between them, her eyes glowing brighter than he had ever seen. Father, she said, enough blood. Please. The old ruler looked at her for a long time. His gaze softened. You stand beside them now. I stand beside those who believe in life, she whispered. Silence filled the chamber. Then slowly the Emperor lowered his hand. He turned to his guards and gave the order that ended the war. Stand down. Across the stars, the Vrin ships powered down their weapons. Human and Vrin vessels floated together in uneasy quiet. The war was over. When they returned to the Resolute, the crew cheered. For the first time in generations, peace was real. Celira sat beside Marcus in the medbay, her strength slowly returning. You should have let me handle it, she said softly. He smiled faintly. You did handle it. You ended it without firing a shot. She looked at him then, not as a soldier or a leader, but as something more. You believed I could change, she said. No one ever did. I didn't need to believe, Marcus replied. I just saw who you already were. Years passed after that battle. The Vrin joined the alliance, their knowledge shared, their people healed. Celira became an ambassador between two races once divided by fear. Wherever she went, people whispered her story. The vampire woman who learned to walk in sunlight. One morning on the rebuilt colony world of New Avalon, she stood in a garden filled with golden light. The air smelled of life and growing things. Marcus walked beside her, now an admiral, his uniform simple but his presence steady as always. You still miss your home, he said. She smiled faintly. This is my home now. You gave it to me. They stood together in silence as the sun rose higher. No chains, no fear, just the quiet strength of two souls who had chosen peace over vengeance. When people later told their story, they said the human had taken her as payment. But those who truly knew them said otherwise. He had taken her as hope. And she had given him back humanity's greatest gift, the power to forgive.